What's up, everybody? Welcome to Mongols. This is our prediction show where we are going to break down what we think is going to happen as Riverhounds head into their final regular season home game of the 2024 season against El Paso. I am Mike Sparks. Joining me for this one is Mr. Justin Ashcraft. Justin, how are you, sir?
I'm great. As you say that, like, where the heck did 2024 go?
Yeah, I don't
Is it,
know.
feels like just yesterday we were talking about the beginning of the season and talking about what is this season going to be and all this kind of stuff. Now we're at the end of the season and we're talking about the last game of the season. That's wild. Anyway, this week has been good. I feel like I think, as you probably can imagine, like working at a church, like pushing towards Christmas. Christmas is a big season for us, and so like all the planning is happening now. And so there's Christmas planning, and then our church is hosting a trunk or treat this coming week, and just some other things. So it's just been like a crazy couple of weeks, and like pretty much the whole month of October has been wild. But it has terrible, and I'm loving this fall weather, so I can't complain about that at all either. So yeah, it's been great. Been a great week.
Good, good, good. Yeah, walking into Lowe's and they already have the giant Christmas section, it kind of breaks my brain a little bit.
Hmm.
It feels like it's goes earlier and earlier every year, but I think in your case it's justified because, like you said, you can't just like show up on, December 25th and it's just ta-da, it's done. Like there's a
Yeah,
lot of pre-work that you guys have to do.
yeah, yeah.
So I get it. Um, yeah, I'm feeling like super old this week. We last night I went and played pickup soccer for the first time in like 2 years. Um, and had a great time. Scored a goal, had like 6 assists, like really good time. Playing with some high school kids and some adults. It was a blast. Woke up this morning and felt like I got hit by a truck. And like I'm
Hmm.
active. Like I ride my bike 5 days a week, 11 miles each time. I do like weightlifting. So I was like, this will be a piece of cake. My feet feel like they've been put through a meat grinder. Like I don't know if I need different shoes or what, but I need to be playing more just to get back in the swing of that things. But yeah, I was just like, is this just what happens as you get old? Like everything just hurts after you do something fun like that? And I guess so. So mm.
Maybe you need to be more like Steve, and
yes. Yeah. Just
hike and bike
constantly
and
out there.
walk, and
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. That's true. Oi. Well, let's get into sort of the news and everything that's happening around the league here before we get into the actual predictions for this game. Those of you who are watching this, or even you listening, you may notice I am not in my normal little green box. Although I did just realize that the walls in this room are also green. Whatever. I was having microphone difficulty, and that's just like an echo chamber if that mic isn't working. So I decided to move somewhere else. But in terms of news, um, if you missed it, we did a pregame and episode with Danny Griffin yesterday. It was so much fun. Thank you again to everybody that submitted videos. You could tell that Danny genuinely enjoyed seeing them. People seem to genuinely enjoy sending the questions in. Eric Dick had a little bit too much fun with it. It was still great. So maybe that will be something that we do again in the future. If you do have questions, between now and, even the next game, if something just comes up in your mind for a specific player, feel free just to record yourself and send it over and we'll just sort of like keep it in the backlog, and then whenever we do have that player on, we'll just queue it up and ask them that question. So that could be a really fun way that like I said, Danny really enjoyed it. I think the other players would really enjoy that. So let's see if we can make that a thing moving forward. um the other big news that we sort of hinted at the end of or after the reaction show last week was that we were kind of waiting on a game to sort of see how things would shake out. And that game was Tampa versus Hartford midweek. Tampa and Hartford drew. So now we have a very crystal clear picture of what the Hounds need to do this weekend if we are to get into the playoffs. And that's really what, most of this talk is about. So for those of you watching, I'm going to throw up the standings on the screen. As you'll see, everybody has played 33 games, so everyone's even. No longer can we say that there are games in hand or not or whatever. It all comes down to this weekend where we will know how things ultimately shake out. As it currently stands, the Hounds are in seventh place. There are only two spots that have not yet been locked up, but the Hounds could jump as high as fifth, depending upon how different teams shake out over this weekend. And so we're going to talk about that for a hot second, because as much as we're interested in the Hounds' last home season game, as much as we want the result to go our way, we are going to be watching other teams and how things shake out, because that's ultimately going to determine where we fall in the standings, which will ultimately determine where it is that we're going to go in the first round of the playoffs. Assuming that we make it. So just to paint those scenarios for you, the team did distribute these, I believe, yesterday. They sort of put out a big blast. We're going to try to make it a little bit easier for you. So essentially, if we win, that's it. We're in. No big deal. If we win, there are two teams that we really want to pay attention to, and they're very different teams than if we draw or lose. So if we win, we end the season on 48 points, and we are guaranteed a playoff spot. At that point, the two teams we're looking at are Rhode Island and Tampa. If Rhode Island lose to Miami and Tampa loses to Indy, we get fifth place, which is awesome. We hold the tiebreaker with Rhode Island, so we'd be on the same number of points. We would get fifth place. So if we win, we want Rhode Island and Tampa to lose. We get fifth place. If Rhode Island get points on Miami and Tampa loses to Indy, we'd be in sixth place. Otherwise, we end up in seventh. So regardless, we should just win, and the worst we can do is seventh. Great. If we draw, which we're going to get into our predictions into whether or not we actually think that's going to happen. But if we draw, we end the season on 46 points. At that point, we're looking at two totally different teams. We're looking at Hartford and North Carolina to see where we land. And interestingly enough, Hartford doesn't kick off until 10 p.m. Eastern because they're playing out west. So we're going to have to wait till after our game is over for their game to even start. But if we draw and Hartford win in Orange County, then there's a chance that we're out depending upon North Carolina do. Hartford would push us in the eighth spot, and then we're watching to see if North Carolina gets a draw or worse against Vegas, we're in. If Hartford wins, we're out. Or I'm sorry, if Vegas wins, we're out. So essentially, if Hartford and North Carolina win and we draw, we are out. I know I'm throwing just a ton of scenarios at you, but I think the important thing is what teams to watch depending on the scenario. But we really just care about the win anyway. It doesn't matter. If we lose, as long as Hartford doesn't win, we are still in regardless of what North Carolina does. Because if Hartford draws, we hold the tiebreaker on average points per game against Eastern teams. It's kind of crazy how many tiebreakers we have to go down with each one of these teams in the East. But yeah, we hold the tiebreaker in the case of if we end up on the same number of points as Hartford. So if we lose and Hartford lose, we would likely end up in the eighth spot, depending upon what North Carolina does. So if we lose, which hopefully doesn't happen. But you have thoughts on that, Justin?
Yeah. I think a couple things. The one I would say, if we win, the fun thing about a positive result is, I think regardless of what that positive result, well, I guess if we draw, but if we win, and more than likely we should, we don't have to go to Louisville, which is, I think 6 weeks ago we were talking about, and if we could just sneak into the last spot, but then that means a trip to Louisville. Is that what we want? No, I don't think so. So I think all of that is interesting. Now we're probably more than likely not looking at a trip to Louisville, no matter kind of the results that happen. So, that's a nice thought. But if we lose, I think I just want to acknowledge something, and it's probably coming from my optimistic side. I don't want to say that the reaction shows trend negative, but sometimes I feel like they do, and I'm not on them very often to course correct. But anyway, I think just a thought that I had, just want to acknowledge something. I think the beginning of this season was rough, and we've all kind of acknowledged that. We had that stretch in the middle of the season where we didn't score a goal, and all this kind of stuff that we, it's been talked about. I'm fine with that. But an interesting dividing line, kind of where I look at this season. July 13th was the day that we played Oakland and beat them 5-0. Before that game, The Hounds were 3-6-9. So if you remember how the season started, we lost 3 straight games. Then we drew 2 games. And then we won 3 in a row. We're like, all right, cool. This feels pretty good. So at that point, we were 3-2. And all right, we're in a good spot. And then from there, we drew 3 games and lost 6 more games and, didn't win another game until July 13th. Since July 13th, we have been 8-6-1. We've won 8 games, drew 6, and we've lost just 1 game. That game to Tampa a couple weeks ago. And so I feel like, we kind of get on this team. You were asking the question, hey, if you could take last year's team over this, and trying to compare and contrast. I don't, I think this team took a while to click. And that, we talked about all the reasons for that. We brought a lot of players back, but not necessarily starters. So there's a lot of players that had to gel together, figure out how to play a full game together, all of that kind of stuff. But I would almost make the argument, I think the end of the season's team could fairly compete against last year's team pretty easily. And I think last year's team, we talked about how many games they lost at home, and yet we still ended up with the player shield. And, I think we had a lot of comments about that team too. But this team in the second half of the season, once everything sort of clicked versus Oakland, they've only actually lost 1 game. And so I think we just have to acknowledge like how good the end of this season has been. Even if we would lose this game and drop a second game of the season, second game of the second half of the season, yeah, that's frustrating. And yeah, you wish we made the playoffs. And yeah, it's a disappointing end of the season. But on the whole, I think we have to give the guys a lot of credit for where they were to where they are now. And like you've kind of said, I don't think that anybody wants to see us in the playoffs, whether we end up 5th and go to Indy or we end up 7th and go to Charleston. Charleston saw us a couple weeks ago and it wasn't fun for them. So I don't think anybody wants to see us in the playoffs at this point. And so I think we got to feel pretty good about our chances if we can get there.
Well, and I think to your point too, comparing this year's team to last year's team, I think especially in this second half of the season, our biggest complaint about last season's team was the lack of scoring depth and how you really only had Dequa, and Dequa was kind of making stuff happen kind of on his own a lot. And when you compare everything else, the defense, shutouts, midfield strength, they're pretty much the same year over year. But I would have to say that we have built upon our scoring depth. When you look at, adding in Jacqueline, Kizza's been turning them out. You have the midfield that are contributing goals. So if a team was to isolate one of those players, it feels like you would have others that would step up and take their spot in a way that we just didn't have last year. So,
Mm-hmm.
yeah, I think your point is really valid that if you were to put, the end of this season's team against the end of last season's team, I might actually take the end of this season's team because I think that they have a better opportunity of succeeding in the postseason than obviously last season's did. So,
Mm-hmm.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
good point.
It's hard. It's hard though. I think if we lose tomorrow, I think everyone's gonna feel real depressed and real frustrated about this season and how it's gone. And yes, I think there's a valid complaint of like the guy put them in this situation or Bob put themselves in this situation by not signing enough players or whatever else. Like there are some valid complaints. I'm not trying to say that there isn't complaints that could have been made about the way this season has turned out. So I'm not saying that at all. I'm just trying to say, like, hey, I think no matter what happens on Saturday, I think we've got to give the guys some huge credit to say it could have been very easy to have a season. Like, when you look at where we were at July 13th, having only picked up 15 points at that point in the season, and you could have looked at that and said, all right, uh, our season could have very easily ended up where Miami's has ended up, or El Paso for that matter, being in the mid 20s of points, and all of that kind of stuff. But the guys have fought their way back, and we're sitting on 45 currently. Could have ended up with 48. And you think about that, we picked up 33 points in what 15, 16 games. Like that's a pretty incredible turnaround, pretty incredible way to get into the playoffs, and and then you hope that we can do something. So, uh, yeah, we this game. But I think if we lose, I just want to acknowledge how good this season has. The second half of the season has been for this team and how well they've done.
Yeah, 2 points per game over that stretch is pretty incredible. So yeah, very, very good point. Um, let's talk about El Paso here. So I think that many of us, myself included, sort of look at this game and say, okay, El Paso, bottom of the West, no shot at making the playoffs, has had no shot of making the playoffs for the past few weeks. This should be a cakewalk. They're coming into Highmark. This should be easy. Um, yes, but here's the caveat. They are last in the West, but they have won three of their last five, including last week. They beat Sacramento 2-1 after having to play Orange County midweek. So, like, this is a team that has battled consistently, even though they've been out of the playoffs, and they've beaten really good teams. So, while it's easy to think that this will be like Miami and maybe they'll just roll over and we'll put three away, I don't necessarily think that that's going to be the case. We're going to have to battle to win this one, but it should still be doable. The other storyline is obviously this is the return of Jamali Waite, who was our starting keeper last year. When you look at his statistics, he's played one more game than Eric Dick, but he's conceded almost twice as many goals as Dick, 35 to 18, despite making 25 more saves than Dick. So that tells me he's facing a ton of shots. If he's had to make 25 more saves and he's still let in, almost twice as many goals as Dick has. So I kind of feel for Jamali. We had this discussion a little bit. I think it was on the reaction show, just sort of talking about keepers and how, Lily seems to just be able to find somebody and make them the next Golden Glove, and that's kind of it. And so you don't sort of begrudge them you don't begrudge anybody, especially somebody like Jamali. We love him. We've talked to him a few times on the show. Leaving, going to get a payday, like great, but the grass isn't necessarily always greener from a stats and team perspective. So we'll see if his team lets him down and we can get a ton more shots on him this season compared to what we've done against some of the other teams. Um, one of the other interesting facts that I saw was that, you just talked about how we were so bad at the beginning half of the season. And we clearly went on that scoring drought where we went 8 games and only scored one goal. For as bad as our scoring has been, we have still scored 12 more goals than they have all season. So they're kind of like near the bottom of the table in shots allowed, and they're near bottom of the table of goals that they've scored. So you can start to understand why they're last place in the West. And the other thing I think that is worth just acknowledging is they have 35 more yellow cards than us and twice as many red cards. So this game could end up being very chippy, especially depending upon how things play out. In the last 2 games that they played, they were pushing a lot of guys forward, which we've seen in the past from other teams is a good recipe for us to hit them on the counter. So this one could be interesting. Like I said, I don't expect it to be like a Miami, but I do still kind of like our chances based on everything else that I've seen. Justin, how are you feeling about this one?
Yeah, I sort of counter your point of it not being like Miami. I think the Western Conference is just so much more wide open this year as far as teams getting points and all of that. When you look at New Mexico leading the Western Conference at 59 points, they'd be third in the East. Going from 2 in the West to 8 in the West, it's 50 points to 42 points, which that spread for the Eastern Conference is 61 to 45. So it's more likely that teams sneak out a result there. I think I don't know why that is. I don't know why the distribution is so different in the East and West. I'm just not sure they're as good. I think there's 3 probably. When you look at Tulsa, Monterey Bay, El Paso, they're all 35, 34, 32 points. And so they can snag points off of each other, where Miami was just not snagging points off of anybody.
Yeah.
And so I don't know that they're that much better than Miami. I think the Western Conference just makes it more interesting in some way, shape, or form. So I think that could be part of it. Looking at those stats, I see a very undisciplined team. Lots of yellow
Hmm.
cards, lots of red cards. They're facing lots of shots, so they're probably defensively unorganized in a lot of ways. They're giving up a lot of goals. And then on the other end, they don't score that much. So I think that provides a pretty easy, I don't know, pretty easy game plan as far as I would think about it. You get your guys like Jockeson into two who can just kind of dive bomb the box and um, cause lots of chaos and get lots of fouls that way. And then on the other end, you stay disciplined and you just don't, you don't let them get chances. Um, you know, it's got to look like what we did against Charleston a couple weeks ago, where it's like, all right, cool, you give them the ball, but you don't give them chances, and then you score on your counters when you get chances like that. And so I don't. This game, I think on paper could look interesting. I think on the field, you might see a disparity between the teams more than you think, based on the points gained this season and all of that. So I don't know. I don't want to oversimplify it or over be like, oh man, this game's going to be so easy. We're going to be able to go out there and cakewalk it. But I think it's a game where there's a pretty simple game plan. Get them into trouble where they're making fouls and all that kind of stuff, um, and then see what happens from there. Kind of create chances, but also not let them have any chances, and then go from there. And so, or do what we've done some other points over the last couple weeks. Get up early, get your early goal, and then you can kind of defend. And so I don't I don't see it being a super complicated game, but also like we've got to calm the nerves. You gotta figure out how to get to a level of peace in the midst of the chaos and be like, all right, we just got to win, but we can't push so hard that we lose. So um, yeah, and you shouldn't have to. So I don't know. It's hard to look at this game and see like, oh man, it should be a tough game. I'm not sure it should.
Right.
They've got a good goalkeeper, but I think if we get chances and get defenders in yellow card trouble and all of that kind of stuff, it makes it hard on weight to be saving stuff.
Agreed. Agreed. And one other point, you talked a little bit about the difference between the East and West. When I was breaking down the tiebreakers, I mentioned, I think first tiebreaker is the record in the East. The first tiebreaker is your record against the team you're playing against. The second tiebreaker is the number of goals you scored against the team you scored against or you played against. And then the third tiebreaker is the number of points that you've taken against other teams in the East. And what's been interesting is that both Hartford and North Carolina, I was surprised when I actually go through their season, they've taken far more points off of teams in the West than they have against, I shouldn't say against teams in the East, but when you look at the points against teams in the East, we have fared much better than they have. And so both North Carolina and Hartford are teams that have struggled this season. And I mean, they've been outside the playoff picture like us for most of the season. And the fact that they're picking up a substantial amount of points from teams out west kind of tells you where the line may be. So even if you're just looking at points, yeah, you made the point that, the top seeded team in the West would be like third in the East. But even if you were to compare the games East versus West, it feels like the East is winning those games more often than not, or at least getting a result. So, so within that argument, there could be a case similar to what you said, where maybe it is kind of like Miami, and we'll see. But I agree with everything you said. I think that this has been a long road. Danny had talked about how it was like every game was a must win. They knew every game was kind of a must win after Birmingham, and they've kind of put themselves in this situation. And I think when you look at every other team, well, you look at the other teams that we sort of are keeping an eye on this weekend, we still have the best scenario. We're playing at home. We're playing against a Western Conference team coming east, and it is the last place Western Conference team, regardless of Jamali weight. So this is what if you were painting up the picture of what you want to get points at the end of the season, this is what you would have said at the beginning of the season. So yeah, I agree. I think this is primed for Lily Ball, where you go out, you get a goal or two, you play tough defense, and you walk away happy, and you get ready for next week. Um, that said, score prediction. What do you think? How do you think it shakes out?
I mean, I think, um, yeah, I mean, I think this is a game where, to me, I think this team is hot and they've kind of figured some things out. I think when they lost to Tampa a couple weeks ago, that was a wake up call to say, all right, if you're gonna make the playoffs, can't have any more of that, um, and then if you're gonna do anything in the playoffs, obviously you're gonna win every game of the playoffs too. So it's like, all right, I think that was a wake up call, and so I think the guys, and then coming back and like having the opportunity to play Miami, was you could almost tell it was a confidence boost, and then you get a big win against Charleston. So I think these guys are confident right now, and so I think they just need to go out with that confidence and then play with that confidence and play like a team that is, 13 points better in the standings and um on a hot streak and all of that. And then I think they'll win. The fans will show up. It's going to be, it's been that one loss was since July 13th was in Tampa. It's been Fort Highmark since the middle of the season. And so I don't see us losing at home. So I don't know. I want to say like I want to say I want to say like 3-1. I think we come out with the confidence that we need to score goals. I think we probably give up one late, when we're all right, cool. We've got 10 minutes left of this game. We're up 3-0, and we might give up one late. Um, but I think it'll be a pretty easy game.
Yeah. My hope is, I agree with you on sort of the undisciplined nature, or at least that's what it seems with El Paso, that if we get up a goal or two, them knowing it's the last game of the season, they're on the road, playing at Highmark, which, talking to Robbie, he was like, teams walk into Highmark and you could see it on their eyes that they don't want to be there. Like the atmosphere in Highmark is insane. And, the size of the field and the turf, that all plays to our advantage. So my hope is if we get up 1-0, 2-0, especially, that they just sort of crumble. But I would be thrilled with a 2-0 win here. If we get up 2-0 and then just control the game and like you don't feel like you have to put anything else in, you don't feel like just shut it down. I think that would also sort of be a warning shot to everybody else of just like, we'll get the job done when we need to get it done and like we're ready for the playoffs. And I think that would be great. As Griffin said, we'd be doing the business. So let's go do the business. So we shall see. But I feel really good about this. Like I think in all the previous games, I've sort of felt good going into the weekend, but at least right now, confidence level is high. I'm feeling good. It feels like it's going to be a party. Um, I don't think there's overconfidence. I think that there is like an earned confidence based on everything they've done up to this point.
Yeah.
So I should say not cockiness, but just confidence, which is great.
Yeah, and
So
I think when you look at the teams around the playoff lines and like who could potentially be, and that's the challenge for the Hounds this weekend is like they can't get ahead of themselves to be like, all right, who are we playing next week? You got to
right.
focus and beat El Paso, and so I think that's where this could become a trap game a little bit.
Mhm.
And you've got to figure out how to like, all right, we're gonna stay focused in this one, and then we'll figure out on Monday who we're playing next week, and all of that. But I think even if you're, Charleston can't do anything this weekend. They can't move at all. Detroit City's got to get a result to stay in third versus Indy. But I think you read down the list of teams. Detroit's picked up 1 point against us this season. I think, Indy saw us a couple weeks ago and it wasn't a good time for them. Charleston saw us a couple weeks ago. It wasn't a good time for them. Rhode Island hasn't really seen us since the middle of the season. So I think like they haven't played us when we're at our best yet.
Mhm.
Tampa, I think probably could have some confidence against us, but also like I think the guys are going to be like, we got to get them back for what they did to us a couple of weeks ago. And I don't think anybody else in the league wants to see it. Like,
Yeah.
I don't, North Carolina, Hartford, Loudoun, Birmingham, it's like, all right, whatever. Like we can get past that game. So I think we've got to, the guys just got to play with that confidence. It's that quiet confidence of like, hey, this is what we've done over the past 15 weeks, really. And, we had that blip against Tampa, but that's been it. And so how do we play with that same level of intensity, that same level of confidence, that same level of swagger? And you see it. I think you see it on the field now. Like the way even watching guys like Sean Suber and the way he defends and the way he gets up after a good tackle and all of that, like it is oozing right now of
Yeah.
confidence and they think they can beat anybody, and they probably can.
Yeah.
Louisville's probably the question that you're like, I don't know. But I think, these guys, again, Louisville hasn't seen us since, the spring, really. So, I think they probably think they can beat them too. And so I think we've just got to go in with that same confidence that we've been playing with so far. And I think this game will be, if we do that and don't look past this game, I think this game will be easy. And then I think, then it's like, all right, who we got? Who we gonna go beat in their place, the next week. So it'll be
Yep.
fun.
Agreed. Agreed. The game will be at home. If you have the opportunity, obviously, make sure you get down to Highmark. For those who can't get there, it will be on Golazo. So if you go looking for it on ESPN Plus, it will not be there. You can stream it for free on the CBS Sports app, which you can get on your mobile devices. It's also apparently going to be available on Paramount Plus for those of you who are trying to watch it on your TV if you have a Paramount Plus subscription. But that's just sort of your early shout. It is not going to be on ESPN Plus, unfortunately. Which also means
The
that the replay
worst.
won't be available, immediately either. Um, One other note: last week we did a game watch party where we sort of stream things live. We're not going to do that this week because the team's at home, but the following week we will do another watch party since we're assuming that most people are going to be either watching it at a pub or they're going to be watching it by themselves at their house. And so we're going to do something again. We might have a special guest. We shall see. Justin, you said that you might potentially join. You're not the special guest, sorry, but like somebody else that we mentioned too. And it could be a good time just to come and hang out with us. So, but that's looking ahead. We got this game to take care of, guys. Let's go get the job done, and we'll go from there. Justin, any sort of closing thoughts for this one?
Nope. Just get the job. You got to win, and let's not wait to have to look to see what Hartford does or what North Carolina does. Like, go out and win
Yep.
the game, and then we'll come home happy, and then it's a matter of who are we going to play next week.
Yeah, I'm much more looking forward to seeing what Rhode Island and Tampa are doing this week as opposed to Hartford and North Carolina. So let's put ourselves in that spot. All right, guys, go get it done. Thank you, everybody. We appreciate all the support. Make sure that you subscribe wherever you're getting this, and we will be back after this game and talking to you with more Hounds content very, very soon.